Welcome to Transformative Principle, where I help you stop putting out fires and start leading. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Welcome to the Transformative Principle Podcast. I am Jethro Jones, your host. The Transformative Principle Podcast is a proud member of the B Podcast Network, the best educational shows out there. If you have a role in education, we've got a show for you. And if we don't, let me know. I'll help you make one. I am excited to have on the show today David Bryan. Through a decades-long career in the trade, business, and education spaces, Dr. David Bryan has garnered the skills to be a curious and eager student of many fields. Having taught at middle school, high school, and university levels throughout the United States, Dr. Bryan gained the experience to spearhead his own venture, co-founding New Road School, a unique independent school in Southern California that devoted between 40 to 50% of its annual budget to need-based financial aid. That allowed New Roads to create a private school population that was ethnically, racially, and socioeconomically diverse. Bryan served as a faculty member, founding head of school, and president from 1995 until his departure in 2013, following which he founded his own consulting business and lectured in economics at UC Santa Cruz. In 2020, Dr. Bryan relocated to rural Wyoming and for the first time in years found himself outside of the classroom. The podcasting space has been steadily growing, allowing people all over the world to connect and leveraging the podcasting format, and fortified by his enduring belief that a person can learn a great deal about the world and other people by simply being curious about what folks do. Dr. Bryan launched his largest classroom yet, the Curiosity Invited podcast. Between the podcast, participating on several boards, and spending time with his wife, Shelley Graham, exploring the many splendors of Wyoming terrain, his calendar and inbox are both pretty full. David, welcome to Transformative Principle. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me have the conversation today.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Tell me, what do you think is the valuable takeaway from our conversation today?
Well, one of them is knowing that and I don't know how I missed it, but for the last 10 plus years, there's been somebody talking about making schools richer, more interesting, you doing that. So that is a value. I mean, that's great. I mean, I didn't know. And it's also great to, I hope you don't always just have conversations with people who agree with you, but it's great to speak to somebody who, we end up nodding our heads at the same time. It's real fun, especially when it comes to education.
Yeah, it is fun. And I don't always talk with people that agree with me, but at the same time, I try to find people who do, because I realize that we are sometimes few and far between in the education space. And so it's nice to be able to know you're not crazy when you're thinking these ideas and having these thoughts.
Exactly.
So a big takeaway for me was how you talked about the richness of a diverse population leads to amazing opportunities. And we're going to talk about New Road School. We're going to talk about Curiosity Invited podcast and how those two things are overlapping in I think a pretty unique way. So I'm excited for our conversation. We'll get to my interview with David here in just a moment. So David, I think the place that I'd like to start is you talking about the difference between public and private schools in your teaching and leadership experience. What's the big difference between those two in your mind?
Well, there is a big difference, but I'm not sure it's the difference that a lot of people speak about. Public schools, depending upon where it is, right? Public schools, this big umbrella that lots of different places fit under, and there's some. There are obviously great public schools and great teachers and administrators in public schools. I would say the thing for me that is very different is there's more freedom, right? There's more freedom in a private school. And I'm just to be really clear, I'm a public school kid. I grew up, I knew there were such things as private schools, but I wasn't really sure why. And everybody went to the school. That school down the block, that's the one. And I never thought I'd be working in a private school, and never mind starting one. But there was, at least when I was in Los Angeles and Santa Monica, the public school situation was really challenging. I mean, it was the budget wasn't big enough. More and more every year, and more kids would be in a classroom. I remember talking to kids. I remember interviewing this sixth grader for a seventh grade entry. And he's, at some point in the conversation, he said to me, there's 60 people in my math class. How am I supposed to learn like that? Right. So there's that piece. And, maybe it's gotten a lot better. Maybe it's not. I don't know. And usually private schools can control that piece more, right? Can make their smaller classes. The other thing that I think is a very big difference is that, again, depending upon the school, teachers, if you trust them, teachers have more freedom to address the particular needs in their classroom. There are fewer kind of overarching mandates. Everybody's doing open court reading. That means everybody in the school district in the third grade needs to be on this page, on this book, on this day. And that's, one size never fits all, neither in underwear, socks, and certainly not in education. So that was a real eye-opener for me and made it wonderful. I think sometimes some of the challenges at private school is that it becomes such a rarefied environment because it's usually it's usually a pricey tuition, or it's often a pricey tuition, and not everybody can afford that. So you get this very odd demographic.
Yeah. Well, you created an idea with New Roads School that you would devote something like 50% of it to need-based financial aid, and so the tuition is $38,000 or $47,000 for this school year. That's just that's a lot of money, and so like how do you make that work where you're able to? Do you just raise prices for people who can afford it so that you can be less for others? Like, tell me about that.
A little bit kind of like that. Well, first I want to say, in case your listeners would just turn down the volume, that it wasn't that much money when we started. But it started in 1995, and tuition was, I think it was about $10,000 that year. But that's, $10,000 after taxes. That's a lot of money. And who can afford that, right? So, but some people can afford it and happen to be in Los Angeles, Santa Monica area. So maybe it had a higher percentage of people who could, but everybody in the school paid tuition, right? Some people paid tuition and some people paid tuition, and it was all based on financial needs. So, you get tax information, you have conversations with people. You assess what people can afford. They tell you what they can afford. So we had people paying, at least that first year, $10,000 for a middle school student, and people paying $5 a month. And there they were in class together. And some of those people had to get a couple of months behind because they really were living on the edge. And so it was like that. And how do you make up for it? It was, it was not my favorite part of the job, but I grew to not mind and sometimes even like it. I asked people for money a lot, and both the people who went there and then people in the world. Sometimes foundations, and sometimes you get surprised that there are philanthropic human beings that have. Their kids have nothing to do with the school. Their kids are long gone, or they don't have kids, and they want to do something that feels meaningful with their funds that they're giving away, and they help them. And sometimes you're hanging by your fingernails at the end of the year because how am I going to do that? So
yeah. Well, I think somebody that you should definitely have on your podcast is AJ Stick, who is the founding principal of the Greater Dayton School. And that school was started by a real estate guy in Dayton, Ohio, who is. So they have two things that are unique. Number one, tuition is free, but it's all need based. And number two, they are committed to spending $30,000 per student on each student each year uh, for the whole time they're in this K school, and then they're tracking each student until they're age
Oh, wow.
27 to make sure that the outcomes that they're looking for are achieved. And so, like
And
that
how is that
approach
funded?
is just
And how is
amazing.
that funded? Is it funded by this real estate guy? Oh, it's phenomenal.
Yep, the real estate guy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
isn't that
wonderful. It's
amazing?
beautiful.
And so when you say they're philanthropically minded people who want to help out and do something good with their money, like they really do exist. And it's incredible what can happen when you connect those people with a good cause, like educating students effectively. So that is certainly a unique approach, having half the students be need-based tuition. What else about New Roads makes it so special and unique?
Well, I think it wasn't that we started New Roads because Los Angeles needed any more private schools.
Yeah.
It was because, really was because, as one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse cities in the world, you would never know that from the neighborhoods or the schools, or many of the schools, most of the schools, private or public or private schools. And so that was quite specifically, the tiger we caught by the tail and we're holding on for dear life. Is like, can we use the things that usually irrationally separate us from one another as a tool to bring us together? So diversity, ethnic diversity, racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity, learning style diversity, whatever those things are, as broad an arm, as large an embrace of diversity as we could without compromising education. And that, I think that just created a richer environment. I remember one time in the early years of the school, we were doing some after school thing, and where everybody was, going to go, a nighttime thing where they were going to read their work for their parents were going to show up. And this is middle school kids, and pizza break, and, we're feeding them dinner. And I'm walking around this large room where they're all sitting in their own little groups, and on their own, these middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids, these middle school kids are, one conversation is, well, if there's a war, I think I'm going to go to Canada, because I don't think the United States should be in and another group is talking about, well, why are women paid less than, they're having conversations that I was trying to get my seniors that I was teaching at a previous school to have in class. They're having them on their own. And over the years, it became clear it's the richness of a diverse population. Really, it really just turns up the volume of educational challenge, intellectual challenge. And so I think that's unique. And the other thing, the thing that New Roads always had a value for, probably because of the wacky guy who started it, is, people, sometimes teachers in frustration would say, oh, that's one of David's special deals, right? Because some kid who already knew everything about, like he was a whiz in that math class. And he would say, what I really want to do, this is boring to me in math class. What I really want to do is fill in the blank. And we would create an opportunity for him to do XYZ, what that thing was. And, from my point of view, in the perfect world, that's true for every kid, right? Every kid has got their own unique tiger by the tail. And so it's our job to to let them hold on as much as we can,
Yeah.
and still get them to be able to do the things that everybody needs to do when they graduate. And, you need to be able to do the math and reading, writing, arithmetic, it's write something meaningful and finish a finished piece, and read something and have something interesting to say about it. So everybody has to do that. So nobody squeaks by without those things.
Well, and this is why you're such a good guest for this show, because we've been talking about this for years, and how each individual person can have their own learning pathway that is incredibly powerful for them. In fact, that is actually the only way that learning happens. We in education like to think that learning is this straight line, A, B, C, D, this is the pathway that you get to that. And the reality is that it is not like that at all. And that every person can look backwards and see that straight line for their own learning. But to the outside, it looks like this jumbled spaghetti mess that is confusing and complex. And one person can say something over here and inspire that person over here, and be able to help that person make a connection that they would not have made otherwise.
Absolutely.
Right?
And thinking, but I think schools that are worthwhile are flexible, nimble, and messy. Because education is those things. And if people don't know that, well, I'm not sure they ever worked in a school. It's a messy thing, learning. Kids are, and of course you think you're delivering, you're the teacher, you think you're delivering that perfect message and you find out this kid's focused on that part of the sentence, this kid's focused on some other thing, and what people got out of it is not what you meant them to get out of it at all. So, it's what do they say about, if you don't want to know, something about not wanting to see sausages made. Well, I think a similar sort of thing. If you don't want to know that, really don't go into education, because that's the world you're in.
Yeah.
And it's actually in some ways, this is not a cheap plug for my podcast, but so having finally left schools and a classroom, which I miss, I dove into the podcast world and started this thing, which is close to a year and a half, year and 3/4 old, and curiosity invited, because in some ways it's what I think about education, and it's also when I look back at my own, especially college. I think college was great and fun, and half of what I learned probably happened in the class, and the other half was in conversations with people, in lectures that had nothing to do with what I was studying that quarter or semester, and it was all the stuff you bump into, when you go to the student union and this person's got a table set up for this, and that, it was an incredibly rich learning experience. And so in some ways the podcast is that, can we be curious with people who, they're not necessarily in our field, and yet, there's so much to know, and there's so much conversation, so much to learn. So Curiosity Invited is my school now.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought it up. So first thing, I wanted to show you this picture, which is what schools think learning looks like, and what learning actually looks like. And I bring this up fairly regularly just to help myself remember that learning is messy, and it's okay for it to be messy. And the reason why I wanted to share that with you specifically is to talk about your podcast, Curiosity Invited, because one of the key aspects of it that I think is really fascinating is, are these types of podcasts, individual courses, things like that, are they the future of education? And what does that future of education look like to you? And I've got some thoughts, but I'll let you go first, and then I'll share mine.
Well, I certainly think it ought to be a piece of what the future of education is. And in some ways, there's been a lot of, it hasn't been that long since the internet kind of exploded, and there's so much to explore, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it's such an amazingly rich tool. And if it's not a part of, I mean, it is. Kids are doing it anyway. Maybe they're going to sometimes they're going to the wrong places, sometimes they're going to the right places, but they're going. And so if schools are not embracing those kinds of rich tools that people are fascinated by and drawn to, well, they're making a mistake. And I think, I started exploring at the school, sort of online learning in this really primitive way as soon as it was a possibility. And so I think that's a piece. It's maybe because the color of my hair is the color of my hair. It's just an extraordinarily different experience to be in the presence of somebody versus in the presence of a square or a rectangle on the screen. As much as I'm enjoying our conversation, both before we turn on record and now, if we were sitting around and, it would be a qualitatively different, it would enrich the conversation in ways that can't happen online. But I think the other thing is true. When COVID happened and I was at the time, after I left the school, I moved to Santa Cruz and was teaching part-time at UC Santa Cruz. And so I was teaching online suddenly. And classes were not as fun because I couldn't be the host walking around to person, which I did when I was in a room. But boy, were office hours so much better. And people opened up in ways that I don't know if they would. They're waiting outside a door and they finally come in and the professor's intimidating and on screen, it was just a much easier and much richer conversation. So I think it's a mistake not to incorporate the world of technology into our education. And yeah, it can totally, people can make the mistake of thinking it's always about the gadgets and it's always about the next flashy thing. But so anyway, I was probably a meandering and a longer answer than you wanted.
No, it's good. It's good. It's all good. So I think the reality is like when we talk about the future of education, what we're really talking about is what people actually get credit for, right? Because that's what we think about when we think about education. And the reality is that everybody has been learning for the entire existence of humankind in their own way, with or without formal schooling. And what formal schooling brought in was this way of saying everybody has to learn this specific stuff in this specific way. And I think that we're actually going beyond that to a point where we can recognize, okay, really, when it comes down to what people need to know, it's really not that complex. You need to be able to communicate, and you need to be able to have some number sense and some math skills. And that is pretty much the basis that you need for everything else. And so you have some literacy, numerical and communication literacy, and then you're going to be in pretty good shape. And you can get most of that out of the way by like third grade with direct instruction. But then here's the really powerful thing. When you are able to give kids or allow kids to go in passion areas, special project areas where they're actually interested, then they learn way more than the standards could actually teach them if they had standards. And the way that I talk about this all the time is, if you have a standard that you need to do double digit addition up to 100, then once a kid can do double digit addition up to 100, then they stop, because that's what the goal was. But if you say, for example, that they need to do multiplication, or they have a project, which is even better, where they need to know how to do
Totally.
multiplication, then they're going to blow that double-digit addition up to 100 out of the water, because they need to go way beyond that in order to do the thing that they're actually interested and need it for something. And this is where I think it really comes down to how do we help kids get credit for the learning that happens that is not necessarily the classroom type learning. So like your podcast is a great example. Can you imagine if a 12-year-old started a podcast like either one of ours and was like, I'm just going to go find smart people who can explain things to me one-on-one, and then I'm going to share it with other people. Can you imagine the learning that kid would have by the time they're done with high school? It would be unreal.
And I would be surprised if that's not happening right now. Who knows if we found one, and that's what kids do. You said it. People have been learning from every human being that is listening to this, and every human being that is not has been learning from the moment they came out of the birth canal. But the moment they were sentient and in the most basic way, they are learning into their world. They're learning that they have limbs. They're learning that they have another end. They're always doing that. They're always, and to watch, when you watch kids chase something that matters to them. I mean, I remember sitting in Washington Square, New York City, and eating lunch, and was watching these skateboarders, and they were trying to learn this particular trick, and they were falling, and they were like whatever, and they never stopped until they did. And it was like, this is it's so clear that this kid wants to learn. He's going to do anything. And his friends are going to help him, and all of those things that happen, right? It absolutely happens. If you can fan the flames that are there, and that's what a great teacher and great schools and great podcasts do, is they fan the flames that people have burning anyway. And if you can do that, that's a great school. That's a great school for those kids.
Yeah, that is such a simple, beautiful way to put it. Just fan the flames of the kids that are there. I've done like 700 interviews for this podcast. Amazing. And here's something that you're saying that is a new insight to me that just simplified so much of what I've been thinking and understanding, and I'm understanding it in a different way than I was before. Fan the flames that are there. How powerful that is. What a simple way to just summarize everything that I've been talking about for the last 10 years. It's just awesome.
Either
it's
good
great.
Or sorry about that.
Yeah. Oh, I should have talked to you 10 years ago. I would have had it. Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. Well, and that's the beauty here, really, is that if you would have told me that 10 years ago, I wouldn't have understood it like I understand it today. Exactly. And that's the part of it that is so amazing, and why learning is so unique for every person, no matter how much we try to standardize it or industrialize it. It is unique for every single person, and we have to respect and honor that, because otherwise we're just missing out on this wonderful opportunity for those
and great
individuals.
Schools and great teachers do that. They whether they know it explicitly or intuitively, they know that, and that's what they do. Have you ever met a fellow named David Bolton?
No, but that
he
sounds
is somebody
wonderful.
Who you should have. I will connect you. You should have on your podcast.
Okay.
He refers to himself as an educational activist. I'm not quite sure what that is, but he is very articulate about in unique ways about kids learning and what schools do. Well, there's so many people that do that, right? Mark Twain, and don't let school get in the way of my education. So, yeah. But I will introduce you.
David Bolton, good. Okay, that'll be good. I think that'll be That'll be great. I mean, I've been talking about this stuff just on this show and in my schools for a decade now, and I'm still just scratching the surface on what is possible with how we approach education and how we help people learn. So I do want to talk a little bit more about your podcast, Curiosity Invited, because you've got some cool guests that have been on there that are really across a broad spectrum of personalities and beliefs and how they operate and do things. And so, what can people get out of Curiosity Invited? What are you trying to do with that show?
Yeah, well, for a big chunk of it, I was trying to, I was trying to see what I wanted to become. I was doing my version of what I think kids are doing as they're learning, right? I was like, well, that would be interesting. I'm interested in that, and and really, I think I'm wanting people. I'm wanting to invite people to have a conversation and explore what they're doing with somebody who doesn't necessarily know hardly enough at all about what they're doing, and explain it to me or satisfy my curiosity. Um, and I think the reason for that is, in some ways back to the college model, right? I mean, when you sat down in somebody's dorm room and had a conversation about God knows what they were doing, meditating, and you'd never heard of meditation before, and what's that? What? And sometimes it sounded nutty, and sometimes it didn't. And I think it's that, right? People are doing interesting things in the world, and they have interesting and sometimes strong opinions about them. And I'm really just trying to coax people into a conversation. I really don't try to do gotcha questions, or, I'm not looking for the embarrassing moment to reveal something about this person. I'm fanning the flames of what's there in a way that both satisfies me and I hope sort of opens their eyes in ways that are different. And, I want them to have fun. I think actually lots of times, learning's better when it's fun. So, and it's
It
not
sure
always
is,
fun,
man.
and maybe learning where the comic goes can't always be fun, but I think it can. so, so,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so I'm trying
Well,
to do
and
that, and you know, it's a hodgepodge of fields and ideas, and it's everybody from, well, we spoke about that before, Daryl Davis and Jeff Scoop, two people from very different orientations in the world who have found commonality. And Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, because suddenly she's the mayor of Los Angeles, and trying to solve problems that are need solving, and music composers, and exploring those ideas with people and exploring what they're doing opens my eyes. I've got one coming up with the fellow who is a gun aficionado. I am not, and right, it's not my world, but it's his, and he's got some interesting, not crazy, not violent things about understandings about it that, boy, it'd be good if more people heard that. More people heard that.
yeah,
So it's that. It's being curious, because I kind of believe that's, that's in some ways that is fanning the flames, right? Can
yeah,
somebody be
totally.
curious about something, right? Can a young person, can an old person, be curious about their world? Because, boy, when you stop being
Yeah,
curious, well, that's tedious.
yeah, and no
Not
fun
no
at
fun
all.
at all.
And
No
yeah,
fun at all.
and you're right. Learning is way more fun, way better when it's
Yes,
fun and when you're actually enjoying it. And that doesn't mean that it always has to be. And sometimes, like you gave the example of the kids skateboarding and how
absolutely.
it is not fun to fall down and get hurt repeatedly, but you do it because you are looking for that next level. You're looking to get better, and in those
No.
situations, skateboarders do not look at it like, oh, I failed at that trick. They're just working up to being
Yep.
able to do it. And that's a powerful mental
Yeah.
frame to be in when it comes to
I
learning something.
guarantee you, at the end of that day, with all those bumps and bruises, that kid had a great day. It's like,
Yeah, for
went
sure.
home and said, Mom, I learned this gnarly trick today. And it was
Yeah.
like great. Bumps and bruises
Yeah.
included.
And the mom's like, "What language are you speaking? I don't understand anything you're saying." Which is
Yeah.
fun too. Dave, my last question, David, is what is one thing that a principal can do this week to be a transformative leader like you?
Well, thank you for calling me that. But what's one thing a person can do this week? Pause before he, she, they say no. Somebody will ask them a question, whether it's a teacher, can we, do this, or can I do this, or a student, or whatever, or another administrator, can we? And before you go to no, pause and see if there's a way to maybe say yes. And because that really does open up the world, right? I mean, it sometimes creates new policy, right? That changes a school. So pause before no.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that because you're not saying don't say
No,
no. You're just saying
just give
just
it a beat.
pause.
Give it a
And
beat.
yeah, that's good. I like that. Just want to make sure everybody knows Curiosity Invited podcast. There's a link to it in the show notes. Go check that out. Go give it a listen or a watch. It's on YouTube as well. And David, thank you so much for being here on the Transformative Principal
Oh, thank
podcast.
you, Jethro. That was fun and a pleasure. And I hope we do it again. And I'm going to get you to come on mine.
Oh, excellent. That'll be great. I look
Cool.
forward to it.